You are not too old. You are just too afraid to move. Gloria heard those words on a Wednesday evening, standing in the doorway of a dance studio she had only stopped in front of because her umbrella refused to open in the rain. She stood there longer than the rain required. Gloria May Washington was 63 years old. Natural silver locks that she wore pinned up during the week and loose on weekends, a small private act of freedom she had given herself at 60 as a birthday gift to no one but herself. Deep brown skin that her mother had called blessed and that the years had treated with a quiet kindness. Hands that had signed 1,000 documents, comforted 100 grieving families, and held 2 newborns into the world. Hands that had learned over time to hold mostly themselves. She was the chief administrator of Hargrove Medical Center, a mid-sized hospital in Atlanta's West End. 14 years in the role. The kind of position that did not leave room for fragility. And so she had quietly dismantled every fragile thing inside herself until the structure was sound and the interior was functional. The house in Cascade Heights was paid off. Her daughter, Imani, was a lawyer in Philadelphia. Her son, Darius, was finishing his doctorate in Boston. Her retirement account was healthy. Her calendar was full. Her Saturday mornings were silent in a way that had stopped feeling restful. She looked at the words painted in clean black letters across the studio window. You are not too old. You are just too afraid to move. She told herself she was reading it critically, the way she read everything, policy memos, budget reports, grant proposals, analytically, without personal investment. She stood there for 4 more minutes. Then she went home. But she did not forget the address. Renee Butler had been Gloria's best friend for 27 years, which meant she had earned the right to be completely insufferable on certain topics. She was exercising that right on a Sunday afternoon, sitting across from Gloria at their usual table at a soul food restaurant in Vine City, stirring sweet tea that did not need stirring. You've been quiet lately. Not your regular quiet, your other quiet, Renee said. I'm always quiet. You're always composed. There's a difference. Renee set down the spoon. Gloria, when is the last time you did something that wasn't tied to that hospital? I took a week off in March. You answered emails the entire week. I saw your read receipts. Gloria did not deny it. You're turning into furniture, Renee said. She opened her bag and placed a brochure on the table between the breadbasket and the hot sauce. My neighbor takes classes here. She said it's wonderful. Adults only, no performances, no pressure, just movement. The brochure was for a place called SEO's Studio, Dance and Wellness for Adults. Gloria looked at it without touching it. I don't dance, Renee. You used to, before Marcus turned you into someone who didn't do anything for herself anymore. The name landed the way it always did, not like a wound anymore, but like pressure on an old scar. Marcus Green. 20 years of marriage. A home they built together, a life that looked like exactly what it was supposed to look like, and a paralegal named Courtney, who he had been seeing for the last 3 years of it. Gloria had found out the way women often find out, not dramatically, but in a quiet, devastating Tuesday moment that restructured everything that came before and after it. She had not screamed. She had not broken anything. She had done what she always did with pain that was too large for the space available. She folded it precisely, put it somewhere interior, and continued. That was 12 years ago. I left Marcus, I'm fine, Gloria said. Leaving someone and healing from them are not the same thing, and you know it. Renee pushed the brochure closer. Just go look at it. You looked at worse before accepting better. Gloria picked up the brochure. She told herself she was just being polite. She went the following Thursday after work, still in her blazer. The studio occupied the ground floor of a renovated building on a quiet block near the West End. Large windows, warm light, the smell of hardwood and something faint, sandalwood maybe, or cedar. A small reception area with a desk, a few chairs, and a wall display of photographs showing people of various ages, all in motion. All with the specific unself-consciousness of people who had stopped performing and started feeling. The receptionist, a young woman named Tasha, was in the middle of telling her about the Thursday beginner class when Gloria heard footsteps on the hardwood behind her. She turned. He was coming from the back studio corridor, carrying a stack of folded yoga mats, and he stopped when he saw someone at the reception desk, not in surprise, but in that particular way that some people have of pausing before entering a space, as if they believe rooms deserve acknowledgement. He was in his mid-60s, she guessed, Korean, silver threading through dark hair at his temples, a lean, disciplined frame, not the build of someone who went to a gym, but of someone who had spent decades asking their body to perform rather than to impress. His face had the particular quality of a life that had held both great sorrow and some hard-won peace. Lines around the eyes that were too numerous for laughter alone, a stillness in the jaw that came from learning not to speak before thinking. He looked at her for a moment, measured, not invasive, and nodded once with the quiet courtesy of someone who had no interest in performing warmth, but possessed the genuine thing. "Welcome," he said simply, and continued to the storage room. Tasha smiled. "That's Mr. Seo, Sung-Jin Seo. He owns the studio, everyone calls him SJ. Gloria looked at the hallway where he had disappeared. "I'll take the beginner class," she said. The Thursday class was taught by a young instructor named Marco. Patient, rhythmic, endlessly encouraging. The style was Latin ballroom, basic salsa, basic rumba, the kind of foundational movement that felt embarrassing for exactly 2 weeks and then began to feel like a language. Sung-Jin taught the class 3 weeks in when Marco was at a wedding in Savannah. He was different from Marco in the way that experienced things are different from enthusiastic things, quieter, more precise, less reassurance and more information. He demonstrated each step once. He did not narrate excessively. When someone made an error, he corrected it directly and without drama, as if mistakes were simply data, not events. When the class paired up to practice and the count came out uneven, he looked at the remaining person, Gloria, without ceremony. "May I?" She almost said no. The word formed in her throat with 12 years of muscle memory behind it. "Yes," she said instead. His lead was unlike anything she remembered from the distant past when she used to dance. It was not controlling. It was not tentative. It was present, as though his attention were a physical thing he placed in the space between them, and all she had to do was respond to it. She missed the cross-body lead twice. "Don't watch your feet," he said. "I don't know where we're going." "That's what the lead is for." A brief pause, and she had the sense he was choosing words carefully. "Trust has to come before direction, not after." Gloria looked up from the floor. He was watching her with an expression that was neither warm nor cold. It was simply attentive, the way a person looks at something they consider worth understanding. She held his gaze for a moment longer than she expected to. Then the music shifted, and she followed the lead, and she did not miss the next step. Gloria woke at 5:15 on Friday morning, and lay in the grey pre-dawn of her bedroom knowing, before she was fully conscious, that she had slept differently. Not better, necessarily, just differently, as if something that had been held at a consistent tension for a long time had, just slightly, released. She made coffee in the kitchen and stood at the window, watching the neighborhood come awake. A neighbor walking a dog, a delivery truck making its early rounds, the light changing in increments over the roofline. She was thinking about his hands, not romantically, or not only romantically, and the not only was what she spent a careful few minutes examining. She was thinking about the quality of attention in them. How long had it been since someone had paid that quality of attention to her? Not to her competence, which people attended to constantly, not to her title or her output or her judgment, to her, the actual person occupying the space. She caught herself before the thought completed and took a long sip of coffee. "You are being ridiculous," she told herself, in the brisk internal tone she used for employees who were wasting meeting time. She went back to the studio the following Thursday anyway. November arrived, and the classes continued, and somewhere between the music and the movement and the conversations that happened after, in the cool-down time when the other students gradually filtered out, a thing built itself between Gloria and Sung-Jin that neither of them named but that both of them knew was there. She learned that he had come to Atlanta 11 years ago, initially for a conference related to a wellness non-profit he'd been part of in Seoul, and had simply stayed. "There was nothing pulling me back," he said, and something about this city felt like it had room for a person who needed to start over. His wife, Hyeon, had died of cancer 9 years before that. He had learned to dance because she loved it, and he hadn't, and he had thought, foolishly, that he had time to close that distance. When she was gone, he kept dancing because it was the one place where he still felt in conversation with her. Eventually, the grief softened into something that resembled purpose, and the studio became the form that purpose took. He said all of this simply, without bid for sympathy, the way people speak when they have made their peace with a loss by agreeing to carry it rather than put it down. Gloria told him about Marcus in the same stripped way, the marriage, the betrayal, the exit, the 12 years since. I decided it was safer not to want things, and she said, professionally, I want things constantly. Personally, I learned to manage expectations. Manage down to 0. Yes. That's not managing. That's surrender with better language. She looked at him. You are very direct. You are too, he said, with everyone else. I have been waiting for you to turn it on yourself. She laughed. Not the polished professional laugh she kept on hand for board meetings and donor events, but the other kind, the one that came from somewhere that hadn't been laughed from in a while. He smiled. It was small and unhurried, the kind of smile that a person gives when they mean it and see no need to emphasize the fact. Imani called on a Tuesday, 34 years old, sharp, loving, convinced that her mother was one of the most capable people alive and therefore needed protecting in specific ways from specific things. Darius mentioned you've been going to this dance studio a lot. Twice a week, yes. And there's a man involved. There's a man who owns the studio. He teaches some of the classes. Mom, a careful pause. I'm not trying to interfere. I just want to make sure that someone isn't taking advantage of the situation. You're at a certain stage in life, and some people... Imani. Gloria's voice was calm but clear, the voice she used when she was ending a conversation that was going somewhere she had not consented to. I have managed a 340-bed hospital through a pandemic, a budget crisis, and 2 changes in hospital board leadership. I negotiated a $14 million infrastructure grant last spring. I raised you and your brother largely on my own. She let that sit for exactly a moment. I am not fragile. I am your mother, and I am having a fine time, and that is the full extent of what you need to know. A silence. I know you're not fragile, Imani said, softer. I just don't want you to get hurt. Baby. Gloria exhaled slowly. Being careful enough to never get hurt and being alive are not the same thing. I know the difference now. After she hung up, she sat in the quiet of her living room for a long time. She had said, I know the difference now. She was not entirely sure when that had become true, but she thought it might have something to do with a Thursday evening and a man with careful hands and a studio full of people who were not too old, just too long afraid. It was a December evening, a Friday, and the last class of the week had ended 20 minutes before. The studio had emptied slowly the way good evenings do, people lingering, putting on coats, exchanging the loose warmth of people who have moved together. Gloria was the last to leave, or should have been, but she found herself helping stack chairs without quite deciding to, and Sung Jin was wiping down the mirror on the far wall, and the holiday music that Tasha had put on before leaving was still playing softly from the speaker in the corner. Something slow, something that belonged to the season without demanding anything from it. You have been here every week since October, he said, without turning from the mirror. The classes are good. They are the same classes they were in September when you were not here. She almost smiled. Fair point. He finished with the mirror and turned around, leaned against the bar with the glass of water he always kept nearby. Can I ask you something? He said. You ask me things regularly. This is a different kind of thing. Gloria set down the chair she was holding and gave him her full attention. Sung Jin looked at her with that particular quality of his, not a stare, not a glance, but something steady and unhurried. The look of a person who has decided that what they're about to say matters and is not going to rush it. You take care of a great deal, he said. The hospital, your staff, your children, even now when they are grown. The people in this studio, you reorganized the community board last month without being asked, and 3 women in the Saturday class told me it changed the entire dynamic. A small pause. You see what people need and you move toward it. You have been doing this your whole life. Gloria waited. "So I want to ask you," he said, "who takes care of you?" The room did not change. The music continued. The string lights Tasha had wound around the front window were still on, casting their small gold light across the hardwood. But something in Gloria's chest, something structural, something she had reinforced so many times over so many years that she had forgotten it was a repair and not the original, shifted. "Who takes care of you?" She opened her mouth, and the answer was not there, not because she didn't understand the question, because she understood it completely, and the understanding moved through her like cold water, through a house that has been too long heated to a single, controlled temperature. She thought of the staff she mentored, and the board she managed, and the budgets she balanced, and the crises she navigated at 2 a.m. from her home office. She thought of Imani's early years, the single mother years, the years when she had discovered that her own need for rest and comfort and reassurance were liabilities she could not afford, and had quietly liquidated them. She thought of 12 years of Saturday mornings that were silent in a way that had stopped feeling restful. She thought, when did I last let someone take care of me? She could not find the year. She started, and stopped. Sung-jin did not fill the silence. He waited with the patience of a man who understood that some truths need space to fully arrive before they can be spoken. Gloria felt her eyes burn. She did not look away. She had learned at some point in her life that maintaining eye contact was a power move, and she had never fully unlearned it, even in moments when it was not a battle. "I don't have an answer," she said finally, quietly. "I know." He set down the glass and took a few steps toward her, not crowding her space, but closing the unnecessary distance. "I couldn't answer it either. For years after Hyeon died, I told myself I was being self-sufficient, that needing care was a burden I wouldn't put on anyone. It's not a burden if you're capable of handling things yourself." "No," he said, "but it's a loneliness, and loneliness dressed in competence is still loneliness." Gloria stood very still. She thought of herself at 31, holding newborn Imani in the hospital, and Marcus crying in the chair beside her, and her thinking even then, "I need to be okay. I need to be the steady one." Where had that started? Who had asked her to be the steady one before she had asked herself? She didn't know. "I've been afraid," she said. The words came out simpler than she expected, unadorned by the professional cadence she usually gave everything. Just true. Of wanting something personal and getting it wrong. Of being someone who should know better and not knowing better anyway. "You know what you are," Sung-jin said. His voice was quiet even. "You are someone who looks at people and sees their capacity rather than their limitation. You did it with the older women in this studio. You did it with staff members at that hospital. I am certain of it. You have a great deal of generosity in how you see others." He paused. "You have very little of it for yourself." Gloria looked at him for a long time, and the thing she had been folding and storing and reinforcing for 12 years, for longer, maybe, for most of her adult life, finally ran out of available space. She did not cry, but she stood there and let the truth of what he had said occupy her fully, without managing it or redirecting it or naming it, something more functional than what it was. "Who takes care of you?" Nobody, she thought. For a long time, nobody at all. He left for Seoul in January. His older sister had broken her hip, and there was the matter of their parents' estate, which had been in a complicated legal status for 2 years and required his presence to resolve. He expected to be gone for 2 months, possibly 3. The morning before his flight, he came to the studio early. Gloria was already there. She had started coming in on Friday mornings to sit in the quiet before her workday began, drinking coffee from the thermos she kept in her car, reading or doing nothing at all. She had not examined this habit closely. "I want to ask you something before I go," he said. "You already used that opening." A small, brief smile. "This one is easier. Will you look after the studio while I'm gone? Tasha and Marco. I don't mean operationally, I mean the heart of it." He looked around the room that had become, in the past months, something Gloria thought about on her drive to work. "You understand what this place is trying to be, better than I could articulate when I started it. I want someone here who holds that understanding." She said yes before she finished calculating whether she had the time. She spent February and March reshaping quietly. She started a Friday morning class she called First Move, for women 55 and older who had never danced as adults and were certain they were not the type. She partnered with a grief counselor at a nearby community center to offer an occasional session she called The Body Remembers for people processing loss through movement. She found a retired music teacher in the Saturday advanced class who knew every Motown song ever recorded and started letting him choose the warm-up music. The studio filled differently, fuller, and with people who came back not for the steps, but for the feeling. Gloria watched it happen and felt at the center of her chest something she recognized eventually as purpose that was also pleasure, a combination she had not experienced in so long that it took her several weeks to identify it. She texted Sung-jin a photograph of a full Friday morning class. He replied, "This is exactly what I hoped." Then, after a pause, "You did this." She stared at those 3 words longer than was probably warranted for someone who processed communications professionally all day. He came back in March, 2 weeks earlier than expected, on a Tuesday afternoon when the intermediate class was in session. Gloria was standing at the back of the room watching Marco teach, with a notepad she had been pretending to use for notes and had mostly used for thinking. She felt the door open before she heard it, or told herself afterward that she had, and turned. Sung-jin was in the doorway, coat over his arm, a small carry-on bag at his feet. He had come directly from the airport, apparently. He stood in the doorway of his studio and looked at what had happened to it while he was gone. He looked for a long time. The intermediate class continued. 12 people in 2 rows, moving through a combination that Marco had choreographed for them. The Friday morning first move schedule was on the board behind the reception desk. There were new photographs on the wall, candid ones. People laughing, people concentrating, people resting in folding chairs between numbers, with the unself-conscious openness of people who have stopped performing. Then he looked at Gloria. She walked to him. The class continued behind her. "How is your sister?" she asked. "Recovering. Stubborn about the physical therapy, but recovering." His eyes moved through the room again. Gloria. It was the staff, really. Tasha and Marco. Gloria. He said her name again, and something in the way he said it stopped her deflection entirely. "You knew what this could be before I did. You just needed a space to do it in." She held his gaze. He reached into the pocket of his coat and held out his hand, not the formal dance class lead of their early weeks, but open, palm up, the kind of gesture that is an offer and not an assumption. "Dance with me." The music in the studio behind her was something slow and familiar. She couldn't place it immediately, something from the 70s, something that lived in the same part of her memory as her grandmother's kitchen and Sunday afternoons that lasted forever. Gloria looked at his hand. She thought about the question he had asked her in December, the one she could not answer. She understood now that it hadn't been a question requiring an answer so much as an invitation requiring a decision, an invitation to stop treating the absence of care as evidence of her strength, and to start treating the presence of it as something she was allowed. She thought, "I have taken care of everything reachable for 40 years. I have been excellent at it, and I have been in the part of myself that I kept quiet and functional and under budget, absolutely alone." She put her hand in his. She did not answer with words. She answered by staying. The song was Reasons by Earth, Wind and Fire. She recognized it in the first 4 bars, and the recognition moved through her like something being remembered rather than learned. She used to know all the words. They moved slowly in the back of the studio, while the intermediate class continued in the front, in the private geography that 2 people sometimes find inside a shared space. His lead was the same as it had always been, present, unhurried, a question rather than a command. And she followed it not because she had surrendered anything, but because she had made a decision. The kind that requires more courage than capability, the kind that a certain type of strong person avoids for decades, because the risk is not falling, but wanting. Gloria May Washington, 63, Chief Administrator, woman who had run departments and raised children, and rebuilt herself from materials that a lesser person would have discarded, closed her eyes for a moment and let herself be held. Not rescued, not managed. Held. Outside the studio windows, Atlanta was doing what it does in early spring. The magnolias along the street just beginning to open, the light coming at the angle that makes everything look briefly and genuinely possible. Inside, 12 people continued learning steps in the front of the room, and in the back, 2 people stood in the particular stillness of those who have stopped moving away from something and started moving, carefully and with full knowledge of the cost, toward each other. Renee would have a great deal to say about all of it. Gloria decided she was looking forward to that conversation. Fleeing love is easier than admitting you still wish to be loved. Gloria May Washington had been excellent at the fleeing. At 63, she chose something harder. She chose to stay.